Are we seriously celebrating a loss to Colorado like it's some kind of achievement? Welcome to the most frustrating paradox in professional sports, the dreaded moral victory. You know what a moral victory gets you? Absolutely nothing except a prettier-looking loss column and false hope that somehow makes the freefall feel slightly less catastrophic. The Vancouver Canucks dropped a 3-1 decision to the Colorado Avalanche on Tuesday night, and if you listen to head coach Adam Foote's post-game comments, you'd think they just hoisted the Stanley Cup. "We played great," Foote proclaimed, as if playing great and losing are somehow compatible concepts in a results-driven league where only wins matter. This is where we are, folks. This is the state of affairs in Vancouver, celebrating competitive defeats like participation trophies at a children's soccer tournament while the franchise burns around them. The brutal mathematics of mediocrity lets inject some uncomfortable reality into this conversation. The time for moral victories ended approximately 2 months ago, when you're sitting at 2-6-2 in your last 10 games, 5 points back of Seattle for that final wildcard spot with the Kraken holding 3 games in hand. You don't get to hang a banner for battled hard. The NHL doesn't award points for effort, grit, or grade A chances that somehow found a way to miss the net. They award points for wins. And right now, Vancouver is collecting those about as frequently as Bigfoot sightings in downtown Vancouver. Here's where things get genuinely fascinating. And by fascinating, I mean absolutely terrifying if you're a Canucks fan. As Vancouver continues its descent down the standings like a runaway toboggan on Grouse Mountain, the trade rumors surrounding franchise cornerstone Quinn Hughes are reaching a fever pitch that would make a tea kettle jealous. Quinn Hughes. The captain going down with the ship. Hughes, to his immense credit, continues to perform like the elite defenseman he is despite the chaos swirling around him. Against Colorado, he logged 29:27 of ice time, registered 4 shots, 12 shot attempts, and generally looked like the only player on the ice who remembered they were playing professional hockey. The man is wheeling, dealing, and doing everything humanly possible to drag this roster kicking and screaming toward respectability. But here's the uncomfortable truth that management must be wrestling with behind closed doors. If Hughes does depart, and that if is becoming less hypothetical by the day, Vancouver's only viable recourse is aiming for a massive multiplayer trade return. We're talking about a package that could reshape the franchise's future, getting younger, accumulating assets, and eventually, hopefully, maybe building something sustainable. The problem? Trading Quinn Hughes would be like voluntarily amputating your own arm, because you've got a hangnail. He's not the problem. He's literally the only thing preventing this team from being a complete and utter disaster. But when you're staring down the barrel of another lost season and your franchise player might be eyeing the exit, desperate times call for desperate measures. The betting markets tell the story management doesn't want to acknowledge. Hughes Norris Trophy odds have drifted from plus 235 to plus 400, representing a 9.9% decrease in implied probability. Meanwhile, Cale Makar, who just carved up the Canucks, has seen his odds improve from plus 190 to minus 500, a staggering 48.8% increase. The market is screaming what everyone can see. Hughes is performing brilliantly on a sinking ship, and his individual excellence is being drowned out by organizational dysfunction. Kiefer Sherwood. The asset everyone wants. Speaking of trades, let's pivot to someone who's actually generating legitimate interest across the league, Kiefer Sherwood. On TSN's Insider Trading, the panel revealed what many suspected. Sherwood is attracting attention from contending teams like moths to a flame, and for good reason. Pierre LeBrun laid it out perfectly. Sherwood carries a remarkably team-friendly $1.5 million cap hit and brings exactly the kind of playoff-style game that makes general managers salivate. Minnesota, Montreal, and Dallas have all kicked the tires, joining what LeBrun described as a long list of interested parties. The Minnesota Wild have checked in multiple times, which tells you everything you need to know about how seriously teams are pursuing him. Here's what makes this situation particularly intriguing. Vancouver isn't rushing into anything. Management wants to understand the complete market landscape before pulling any triggers. Smart teams, and let's hope Vancouver qualifies, will be asking potential suitors a critical question. Are you willing to sign Sherwood to a long-term extension? Because if the answer is yes, that dramatically increases his trade value. Think about it from Vancouver's perspective. If you're going to sell, you want maximum return. A team that's not only willing to surrender assets, but also commit to Sherwood long-term is essentially telling you they view him as a core piece, not a rental. That's the difference between getting a second-round pick versus getting a first-rounder or a legitimate prospect. What's particularly noteworthy is that multiple insiders noted that most trade conversations they're hearing around the league start with Vancouver. The Canucks aren't just participants in the trade market, they're the epicenter. When your team becomes the focal point of trade speculation, it's either because you're brilliantly retooling or catastrophically imploding. I'll let you decide which category Vancouver falls into. The betting markets have rendered their verdict. If you want an unvarnished, emotionless assessment of where the Canucks stand, look no further than the betting markets. Gamblers don't traffic in sentimentality or moral victories. They deal in cold, hard probabilities. According to ESPN's sports betting analysis, Vancouver's playoff odds have plummeted by 30% since the preseason began. Let that sink in for a moment. 30%. That's not a minor adjustment or a slight recalibration. That's the betting public collectively deciding that Vancouver's preseason projections were wildly optimistic and the reality on ice has been brutally disappointing. The Canucks find themselves in exclusive company and not the good kind. Only 4 teams have experienced swings greater than 25% in their implied playoff chances. Toronto down 43%, Vancouver down 30%, Florida down 27%, and Anaheim up 43%. Expanding that threshold to 20% adds only 4 more teams. What does this tell us? The betting markets, which aggregate thousands of individual assessments and millions of dollars in wagers, have fundamentally reassessed Vancouver's season trajectory. They've looked at the 2-6-2 record in the last 10 games, the 5-point deficit to Seattle, the 3 games in hand the Kraken possess, and collectively said, yeah, this isn't happening. The 3-point system, a solution to overtime madness? Now, let's discuss something that doesn't directly impact the Canucks' current predicament, but could fundamentally alter how we evaluate NHL standings, the proposed 3-point system for wins. Shayna Goldman at The Athletic recently published a compelling analysis examining what the league would look like if regulation wins were worth 3 points, overtime wins worth 2, and overtime losses worth 1. Before traditionalists start screaming about tampering with hockey's sacred traditions, hear me out. The current system creates perverse incentives that reward defensive, conservative play in the third period. Teams protecting 1-goal leads routinely shell up, content to take their chances in overtime where they're guaranteed at least 1 point regardless of the outcome. This season, Pacific Division teams are driving a surge in overtime games. The Kings have appeared in overtime 12 times in just 25 games. The Wild have gone to extra time 11 times. The Oilers, Kraken, Blue Jackets, and Flyers have all hit double digits. What does this mean? More loser points distributed across the standings, artificially compressing the playoff race, and making it harder for teams on the outside to gain ground. Hockey is famously a game of inches, razor-thin margins separating victory from defeat. Yet, our current standings system doesn't reflect that nuance. A regulation, when earned through 60 minutes of superior play, carries the same 2-point value as an overtime when decided by 3-on-3 chaos or a shootout skills competition. Does that make sense? A 3-point system would reward teams that finish the job in regulation while still providing incentive for overtime drama. It wouldn't radically overhaul the standings. And that's actually the point. The goal isn't revolution, it's evolution. It's about creating a system that better reflects which teams consistently win games in traditional 60-minute settings. For a team like Vancouver, desperately trying to close a 5-point gap on Seattle, a 3-point system could theoretically provide more opportunities to gain ground quickly. String together 3 or 4 regulation wins while your competitors settle for overtime victories, and suddenly you're making up significant ground. It rewards aggressive, attacking hockey rather than defensive point-protecting strategies. The Gavin McKenna tank question nobody wants to ask, let's address the elephant in the room that nobody wants to acknowledge publicly, but everyone's thinking privately. Could the Canucks realistically tank for Gavin McKenna, the consensus top prospect for the 2025 NHL Draft? Harman Dayal at The Athletic recently explored this question in depth, and his conclusion might surprise you. Despite Vancouver currently sitting in 30th place in the overall standings, actually finishing last in a 32-team league requires a special kind of sustained incompetence that even this Canucks team might not possess. History provides a cautionary tale. In 2022-23, Vancouver endured their worst 16-game start since the Marc Messier era and similarly occupied 30th place. Predictions at the time suggested they were pretenders in the Connor Bedard sweepstakes. And sure enough, a mid-season coaching change sparked enough improvement that they ended up picking 11th that summer. Several factors work against Vancouver's tanking aspirations or in favor of their competitive prospects, depending on your perspective. First, coaches and players will never intentionally lose. NHL players are hyper-competitive athletes whose individual futures depend on performance. Ice time, roles, and future contracts all hinge on playing well, creating natural resistance to organizational tanking strategies. Second, Vancouver doesn't exist in a vacuum. The Predators and Flames are arguably worse teams with fewer high-end talents and more difficult remaining schedules. Nashville could sell off veterans like Ryan O'Reilly, Steven Stamkos, Jonathan Marchessault, and potentially even just Saros at the deadline, accelerating their descent. Calgary, meanwhile, is the NHL's lowest-scoring team by a substantial margin, with only Nazem Kadri on pace for more than 45 points. However, some factors do work in Vancouver's favor if tanking is indeed the goal. The Canucks are surrendering goals at the worst rate in the NHL, and their defensive metrics for limiting shots and high-danger chances rank among the league's worst. These aren't fluky results or bad luck. They're earned through consistently poor defensive play. Additionally, if management follows through on their apparent willingness to sell veteran assets, the roster could become significantly weaker. Losing Sherwood, the team's leading goal scorer, Garland, one of their only play-driving forwards, and potentially others would devastate an already thin forward group. Sometimes the best way to tank isn't trying to lose, it's simply removing the players who prevent you from losing. The Crossroads, rebuild, retool, or remain in purgatory. Here's where we need to have an honest conversation about the state of this franchise. The Canucks are trapped in hockey purgatory. Not good enough to compete for playoffs, not bad enough to secure a top draft pick, and not decisive enough to commit fully to either direction. Adam Foote can talk about moral victories all he wants, but at some point results matter. Quinn Hughes can continue his Herculean individual efforts, but one player cannot overcome systemic organizational dysfunction. Management can explore the trade market for Sherwood and others, but half measures won't fix fundamental problems. The betting markets have rendered their verdict. Vancouver's season is effectively over. The odds have cratered. The playoff probability has evaporated, and the smart money is looking elsewhere. That doesn't mean miracles can't happen. Sports exist precisely because the improbable occasionally becomes reality. But it does mean that rational assessment suggests this season is lost. So, what comes next? Does Vancouver commit to a full rebuild, trading veterans for assets and embracing a multi-year reconstruction? Do they make a desperate push, buying at the deadline in a Hail Mary attempt to salvage playoff hopes? Or do they continue this agonizing middle ground, neither buyers nor sellers, neither contenders nor tankers, just existing in mediocre limbo? The answer to that question will define not just this season, but potentially the next several years of Canucks hockey. Management faces a fork in the road, and the path they choose will reverberate through the organization for years to come. The verdict: no more moral victories. As we wrap up today's analysis, let's return to where we started. That 3-1 loss to Colorado and the moral victory narrative that followed. Yes, Vancouver played competitively against one of the league's best teams. Yes, they generated quality chances. Yes, Quinn Hughes was magnificent, but they lost. Again, that's 2-6-2, in their last 10 games. That's 5 points back of a playoff spot with time running out and competitors holding games in hand. That's a franchise at a crossroads, facing decisions that will shape its future for years to come. The trade rumors will intensify. The betting odds will continue reflecting harsh reality. The debate about tanking versus competing will rage on. And through it all, the Canucks will keep playing games, trying to find answers to questions that grow more difficult by the day. This isn't the time for moral victories or silver linings. This is the time for honest assessment, difficult decisions, and decisive action. Vancouver's season hangs in the balance, and the clock is ticking. One thing is certain: moral victories won't cut it anymore. The time for feel-good losses and competitive defeats has passed. Vancouver needs to make hard decisions, commit to a direction, and execute with conviction. Anything less is just rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic. What's your take? Is it time for Vancouver to embrace a full rebuild and trade everyone not named Hughes? Or can this team still salvage something from this disaster of a season? Drop your brutally honest thoughts in the comments below, and smash that like button if you appreciate the unfiltered truth about where this franchise stands. We'll be back with more hard-hitting analysis as this trade deadline drama unfolds.